I've been told everything from tier lists don't matter to playing low tiers is useless. But just how true are these statements, and what does the evidence have to say about it? What's going on, guys? This is Dr. Apolly, and today we're going to be talking about how much tier lists matter. But before that, we need to go over what exactly a tier list is and how we define it. A tier list is a ranking of all of the characters' expected competitive performance in a tournament setting, assuming the players' skill levels are identical. The characters who are expected to do better are ranked higher or more viable, and vice versa. Tier lists are usually determined by whichever character is currently performing the best in tournaments. Results aren't everything, but they're often huge contributors as to what defines a tier list. Tier lists represent what is currently powerful, so as a result, they develop with the metagame. In Smash 4, Luigi was considered a mid-tier character for a very long time, but as the meta slowly shifted to reward stronger punishes over strong neutral, he started to rise. Tier lists tend to change from region to region. In some regions, a character may play better because the conditions they're played in are more favorable. Think Smash 4 and Duck Hunt Dog. In America, he was considered a bad character for the longest time, but in Japan, he was a solid mid-tier. Americans are known to be less patient than their Japanese counterparts, so Duck Hunt Dog had a harder time thriving under their conditions. However, in Japan, Duck Hunt Dog is considered decent in part thanks to their more patient metagame being more favorable for him. It's also possible for you to live in a region with very hard matchups as a top tier, or live in a region with very doable matchups as a low tier. Tier lists are a form of natural selection in that sense. In a deciduous forest, a bear may be at the top of the food chain, but simply moving him to a rainforest would change a lot. Tier lists are also influenced by theoretical analysis. And here is where we run into our first problem. There's a camp of players who believe that some characters are better than other characters simply because, in theory, they should be better than what their performance suggests. For example, Fox has been considered the best character in Melee in part due to how he theoretically has the most options and versatility under most circumstances. Despite this being a fairly common opinion, there has never been a dominant solo Fox main in the history of Melee. Just as we can't only rely on exposure and results, we can't solely rely on theory. Aside from having bounded rationality and bounded awareness, something all humans suffer from, there's also factors that have nothing to do with the game itself that we must consider. When you think purely theoretically, you don't take into account how hard some techniques are and the risk involved in doing so. To help prove my point, let's take Leffen. Leffen is a strong advocate for Puff being the best character in the game. He's not taking this from a theoretical standpoint, but rather a more situational standpoint. Puff being a more simple character comparatively who changes the way you have to approach the game along with the lack of tech skill required to play her, makes her less physically and mentally demanding than someone like Fox, who may theoretically be the best character. That really highlights the problem of looking at things purely theoretically. You're assuming players are playing at their best in every circumstance. This is not possible for us. We're only humans after all, so we must take human error into consideration. Fox theoretically may be untouchable, but he's extremely hard to play proficiently, especially for long periods of time under tournament conditions. This is why, despite having a lot of objective connotations throughout the community, tier lists are actually quite arbitrary. What feels viable is affected by the popularity of the characters in the meta and whatever region you may be living in. Being the faulty humans we are, we will naturally feel inclined to pick the higher tiers in a competitive environment. Playing high tiers for some people mentally assures them that they are stronger. Top tiers tend to be the ones that have more options and versatility. This gives players the mental illusion that they can do anything. Whatever situation you may think you're in, you can get out of it. It's actually this philosophy that high tiers can do anything and low tiers can't that makes the high tiers stay high and the low tiers stay low. More people will play high tiers because they're perceived to be better than low tiers. It's also because less people play low tiers that they often end up having some latent potential unbeknownst to anyone else. Amsa, the Japanese Yoshi, single-handedly moved Yoshi up 6 spots on the tier list 14 years after the game came out. Nobody had lately considered Puff to be the number 1 character until Hungrybox started winning everything. The high tiers have a lot more usage and exposure, so their meta develops far quicker than that of low tiers. Funny enough, it's also because of this that low tiers are able to shine. Amsa, Axe, and Hungrybox all continue to be top players not only because they're obviously very strong players, but also because of matchup unfamiliarity. People aren't as comfortable fighting a Game & Watch player as they are fighting Wolf or Pichu, which can ironically give some low tiers an advantage when compared to high tiers. In a game like Smash Ultimate with over 70 characters, this acts as an inadvertent balancing mechanism. Due to the inherent nature of competitive fighting games, the high tiers early on are usually the ones who end up being simple and exploitable. We've even seen this with a game as young as Ultimate. Remember when everyone thought that King K. Rool and Inkling were the best characters in the game because they had a few simple exploits? Early Melee was no different. Sheik was considered the best due to her being simple and having very easily accessible and strong tools. As the meta developed, Fox transformed into the best character as people found out he had more options, better mobility, kill power, etc. The reason Fox wasn't considered the best from the get-go was because Fox was a lot more technical, which made it take longer for people to master and fully take advantage of his tools. I will say, however, that with Ultimate and the size of the competitive scene that we've garnered thus far, technical exploits are figured out and utilized a lot more quickly than they used to be. So a prospect of the Smash Ultimate tier list changing as much as Melee's tier list has changed over the years is rather unlikely, at least without the inevitability of patches changing things. Now that we've defined what a tier list is and how they are determined, let's take a closer look at how much they really matter for Smash Ultimate. If you took note of some of my subtle clues, my answer shouldn't surprise you. I honestly don't think that the character you play really matters all that much. Nairo, Meister, and Sinji have all done some pretty impressive stuff with low tiers. When one player is better than the other, they counter a lot of the worst player's habits and tendencies. A lot of the times, it's what the worst player does subconsciously, without even knowing. In Light's set against Zero at Smash Summit, he noticed how whenever he would hit Zero forward and slightly above the ground in a tech position, Zero would always tech in. When it was game 4 and Light was just one game away from winning the set, he used this knowledge to his advantage and capitalized accordingly, taking away 2 stocks. When you're playing better than your opponent, you're able to find tiny cracks in their gameplay to beat them, even if you seemingly have weaker options. In other words, it's important to remember that you're playing the player before you're playing the matchup. A lot of options are powerful, but none are outright unbeatable. Smash is just way too dynamic for rigid flowcharts to always work. It's only when you reach the highest level do tier lists really start to matter. At that level, even when you find cracks, you may not be able to capitalize on them due to your character's limitations. When it comes to top level play, I believe there's some sort of threshold your character must meet. This threshold I speak of is usually referred to as what is viable and unviable. At the very top level, top 50 in the world or so, if your character is viable, let's say Melee's top 10 or so characters, then the character you pick doesn't matter. Aside from a few rare cases, the difference between number 1 and number 8 at top level is usually negligible. Despite what Reddit or the YouTube comment section may tell you, Melee's metagame actually consists of more than 3 characters. In fact, the latest Melee Major had 5 characters played in top 4 alone. The difference between Fox and Pikachu on the tier list wasn't enough to invalidate Axe. Once you reach a certain threshold, it's all about you and what you prefer. Most pros don't usually pick the character they think are the best. Armada played Peach, certainly a strong character, but universally considered worse than characters like Fox, Falco, or Sheik. He eventually did play Fox, but it was only for certain matchups. Despite this, he's now retired and still considered the greatest Melee player of all time, despite not playing the best character in the game for most of his run. Zero played Diddy Kong in a meta infested with Clouds and Bayonettas and still stood number 1. Yes, he was still playing a very strong character, but definitely not the best. No matter what level you are, what's more important than anything else is understanding your character and outwitting your opponent. If that doesn't encourage you to improve, then, well, I guess Smash Ultimate is still in its infancy. A lot of stuff can change. Strong characters can get nerfed and weak characters can get buffed. If you play a weaker character right now and they get buffed, you've got a little head start over anyone else who may be trying to pick them up. In my home region, Alberta, one of our best players for the length of Smash 4 was Too Many Cooks, who played Dr. Mario. We're no SoCal or Florida, but we aren't a free region either, so this was pretty impressive. A couple years pass by and Too Many Cooks switches to Mario, who for all intensive purposes is strictly a better version of Dr. Mario. You would think that when a skilled player like him plays a better character, that his dominance in region would be accentuated and his results out of region would be even better. But they actually stayed relatively the same. This is cold, hard proof that the tier list isn't the main factor that determines your success. Don't get me wrong, I still believe it was a good move for him to switch. If he were to ever break out and become a top level player, playing Mario is a lot smarter for the long run. This may sound cliche, but make sure that you play a character that you yourself believe in. If you don't believe in your character, you will never reach your peak. You'll always feel as though you could have done better if it weren't for the limitations of your character. One last thing that no one seems to talk about, but I feel plays a very important role, is how you actually feel about your main. Not in terms of the tier list per se, but how you relate to your character. Oftentimes when people share an intimate connection with their character, they perform better. It's been shown that players perform better when they connect with their character's personality, appearance, story, and values. This may seem trivial, but it really does matter. When you spend all those hours with your character, they almost become a part of you. Think Samsora with Peach, Daigo with Ryu, or Elegant with Luigi. At his peak, Elegant was a national threat, one game away from taking one of the most elusive Smash tournaments on top of all the Clouds, Bayonettas, Rosalinas, and Zero Suits. All matchups that Luigi arguably lost. All characters ranked considerably higher than Luigi on the tier list. How was he able to do this? A lot of thought goes into the design and feel of each and every character. With that in mind, I think that some of what separated Elegant from someone like Mr. Concon was how he was able to optimize Luigi in a way that no one else could. He had a strong punish game, one of the best advantage states, outstanding edge guards and offstage awareness. He instilled a fear that no one else really could. He made you feel like you could die at any moment's notice for trying to do anything. Now let's look at Luigi in his games. Luigi is random, unpredictable, and clumsy. Elegant was able to channel all of that into the explosive, off-the-wall playstyle we love him for, and the results speak for themselves. Many people argued whether Luigi was ever a good character, but Elegant's skill and understanding of his character is truly undeniable. There were other Luigis that could do what Elegant could do to varying degrees, but it was obvious that Elegant had a more personal, innate connection with his character, and I feel that's one of the reasons Elegant was able to thrive. The tier list is primarily determined by theoretical analysis and results, which are determined by whatever the metagame at the time promotes. You really shouldn't worry about what character you play right now. The game is still young. Strong characters can get nerfed and weak characters could get buffed. You should only really play a top tier right now if your goal is to be a pro gamer. I think the main reason you should look at a tier list is if you want to be safe and play characters with an already established meta, or if your character has some really bad matchups. Oh, what about matchups? I didn't really talk about them. People might want to know when matchups are too bad and if their character is solo viable. Fuck. Let me know if you want me to make another one of these type of videos on matchups and matchup charts. Getting back onto tier lists, you shouldn't care about tier lists if you don't care for being the best. If you want to beat up your friends or stand atop a local PR, you're an innovator, or you just enjoy other characters. I think that this point in particular is most important when choosing your character. That'll be it for me in this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Join my Discord, consider supporting me on Patreon, all links in the description. I'll catch you all next time. Alright, peace.